Tell us about the Oval Office tapes.
The Oval Office Tapes is a weekly podcast that gives listeners the same access that we have to the actual audio tapes that are being recorded in the White House. People don't know, but there are microphones planted in the White House, in the Oval Office. The phones are tapped. There's a whole thing. I mean, I can't really get into it, but
It's classified.
well, I don't even know that it's known enough to be classified. But the fact is, there are microphones throughout the White House. We have the tapes. We put them out on Fridays.
That's why I thought the concept of the show was genius, because literally right now our White House is probably wiretapped by multiple foreign countries.
I'm telling you that there are microphones in the White House. We have the tapes, and we give them to you.
So I was listening to the most recent one where you guys covered Pocahontas, Melania.
Yes, sure. Well, Senator Warren, as we all know, issued her the findings of her DNA test this week, and we have access to the phone call in which she tells the president it's time to pay up, and he schools her a little bit on what it's like to make a bet with Donald Trump.
What did you think about that DNA test story in general?
Me personally?
Yes.
I think if you listen to the podcast, you'll know what I think of it.
Yeah.
I think that Elizabeth Warren and any Democrat who decides to take this guy on better be ready to fight, and ready to fight on the kinds of terms that it's going to take to win now, or else they're going to get squashed like a bug under a Mack truck. And I think that's what happened to Elizabeth Warren.
I noticed we listened to the whole thing. We listened to all the episodes. I noticed it's entertainment first, but you got enough political commentary in there about your point of view, which I like.
Well, the truth is, the fact of the matter is, we try to tell the truth first,
Yeah.
And from that emanates many things, comedy, recognition. Things are funny because they're true. They're not funny because somebody's slipping on a banana peel. We're not doing slapstick humor. You're laughing at our podcast because we're telling the truth, and we're telling it in a context that is very kind of specific to the president and the people in our political world right now.
Have you worked I know you're a filmmaker and you have a long theater background, but was this first in podcasting?
This is my first experience in podcasting, but not in radio. I worked at National Public Radio. Well, I took a year off from college and worked at NPR back in the kind of glory days when Frank Mankiewicz was running NPR, the man who was Bobby Kennedy's press secretary, and Susan Stamberg was still hosting All Things Considered, and Bob Edwards was a young man hosting Morning Edition, and then some years later I worked on an NPR show. I produced an NPR show called Heat that John Hockenberry starred in or hosted, I want to say, and among my fellow teammates on that project were Ira Glass and Joe Richmond, people who have kind of gone on to become NPR legends. So I learned from some remarkable people about radio and the principles of kind of audio storytelling, but this is the first time we've ventured into the podcast world.
Did you think of this concept as a podcast immediately, or did you think of it in other ways first?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I work in film and television primarily now, so my initial thought was that we would make this as a television series. And as I started speaking to friends and colleagues who were executives at different television outlets, the kinds of questions they were asking nobody questioned the idea. Everybody questioned, how would you do it? How could you possibly do it? How could you write a show every week that responded immediately to what was going on, and then performances? And so when I met the good people at Blumhouse, Jason Blum and his team, and started talking to them about it, we all thought, well, maybe the way to address that first is by proving the concept through a podcast. And the podcast itself then took on a life of its own. It's kind of perfect as a podcast, although it certainly now demonstrates that you can write on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday an entire episode, record it on Thursday, drop it on Friday, and make adjustments. And so we're doing that. People are responding. We're getting a kind of crazy number of weekly downloads, and the following is growing, and it's increasing exponentially every week, and all of those things are happening. And now, the interesting thing is that television outlets, because of the success of the podcast, have started to reach out to us. So it's likely going to have another form as a television show, but of course the key remains responding in the moment to what's going on.
And you already know it works, which in a business where no one wants to take a chance, you have a provable concept now.
Absolutely. I mean, underlying material is always helpful, especially in the kind of wild west of this particular golden age of television. You really need to distinguish yourself, and this helps.
We do a non-scripted show. It's about obviously Mueller and then just the politics in general.
Yeah.
But are there any challenges in a radio play, a scripted show that, I don't know, you think no one knows about, or something unusual?
There's 1,000 challenges. I mean,
how much time do you have?
Yeah, I mean, everything's challenging. You gotta, first of all, you gotta get the right people together. Yeah. And fortunately, we've done that. Trevor Smith, our producer, has put together an incredible team, and we have Scott Conroy's our head writer, and Mike Schneider and Leslie Holland.
A lot of great people.
Our writers, and they're brilliant, and so our ability to work together as a team is key. But that's going to be key to anybody who's writing, because we got to move quickly, And we are literally writing a 30-minute episode. The first draft is done Tuesday night. Yeah. We start Monday morning. And then it gets rewritten over Wednesday, recorded on Thursday. You also have to cast it well. You listen to, we're going to be doing a live panel today that's kind of a best of, and it'll be hosted by Judge Jeanine Pirro. We're very happy to say. It may or may not be the real Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Oh, okay.
In any case.
I'm not very smart. I never was, by the way.
She'll be hosting, but when you listen to this kind of selection of 8 of our favorite segments that we put together for it, it's impossible to tell that it's not Mike Pence advising the president. No. It's impossible to tell that it's not Kim Kardashian. It's very difficult to tell that it's not the president himself, and that has to do with the talent of the actors, not only their ability to do the impersonations, but their acting chops. So. Again, and this is another challenge, since we're listing all the challenges. You've got to define your principles well. Yeah. So if you're going to get a laugh on any count, if you're going to get a laugh no matter what, if that's the guiding principle, that's one thing. That's not our goal. Our goal is telling the truth. Our goal is to be as real as possible, and all else follows from that.
So the opposite of the Trump administration, basically.
No, I think the Trump administration, it's not the opposite. It's just a very different goal. They're looking to destroy all institutions and change the nature of democracy in the 21st century, and to support this kind of Il Duce-like figure who would like to be president for life. That's their goal. That's very different.
Speaking of which, politically, where do you see this country going from here, at least for the next, I don't know, let's say a year?
It's hard to say. I mean, you've got congressmen supporting Canadian mayoral candidates who are, and this is not funny, who are backing far-right organizations that are raising what they call the JQ, the Jewish question. Where are we heading? Yeah. If we don't stop it, we're fucked. Yeah. Is where we're heading, and it's not a joke. And we are in serious, dark, trying times. So a lot of it has to do with where this election goes. A lot of it has to do with how voter registration is regulated and liberated. A lot of it has to do with how young people vote. But I'm on behalf of my kids who are 3 years and 3 months old, young people better fucking show up and vote their consciences and vote the kind of country they want. Because if they're not careful, they're going to end up supporting a fascist dictatorship, and that's where I think the country's going. Also,
like, all due respect to some of our friends on the floor there's a lot of young people out there. wearing red hats, and it's.
They better know what it means. You know, they better know what it means, because what it doesn't mean is jobs. Yeah. I mean, Trump has decreased unemployment 1%. Okay, that's a fact. And by the way, that's another thing. Red hats are anti-fact. So when you put that hat on, know what you mean, know what you're standing for. If that's what you want to stand for, if you want to stand for the far-right fascist movements, if you want to stand for the end of facts, if you want to stand for decapitating journalists, go ahead, put on your red hat and walk around on the floor of Politicon. But if you don't want to stand for those things, be very careful before you put your red hat on. I say, ha 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 ha.
I think I just heard a campaign speech. That was.
You know what? I mean, that's another thing. If the Democrats are going to do anything, if the left is going to do anything in this country, somebody better have fire in their belly, and it's not going to come from falling right into the trap of what you could call the Pocahontas Trap. Don't issue your DNA frickin' report 3 weeks before the midterm election, and get a message. And because you're fighting hate, you're not fighting. You're not fighting pre-existing conditions, and I'm not sure that hate can be fought that the level playing field is pre-existing conditions. I saw Chuck Schumer the other morning on Morning Joe, and he was pathetic. He doesn't get what kind of he's bringing a paperclip to a gunfight. And so they better be careful. They better find some candidates with real fire in their belly, not people who get up and walk out in the middle of Senate hearings and then boast about the fact that they walked out. Walking out is not how you fight this fight. You fight this fight by standing there and fighting the fight, bare-knuckled with strong language that's persuasive. But, I don't know. We should all be worried, and we should all be concerned, and we should all be doing everything that we can to go toe-to-toe with these people.
I agree. And you've managed to combine art with a purpose, which is pretty important.
Thank you. I mean, look, the work is the work, and I think everybody, we're writers and creators, and I'm a director and a producer and writer on this project, so I all the work I do is, I'm responding to the world I live in, the times I'm in, and what I think and feel, and that's what artists do. But we're also citizens, and as citizens, we have to, we have to take this stuff seriously, and first and foremost, we have to register and we have to vote.
I know you made the War Room, and I wanted to ask you, how do you think politics have changed? I mean, how have they changed, if anything?
It's so interesting. The War Room is now 25 years old, and just last Tuesday, the Academy hosted the Motion Picture Academy hosted a 25th reunion for the film. It was a magical night. It was really awesome. James Carville came. Dee Dee Myers was there. I produced the film. My fellow producer Wendy Ettinger was there. D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hedges, the directors, were there. And it was just a fantastic night and very exciting. We screened the film, and certainly the times have changed. I mean, that film in those days, rapid response was within the 24-hour. And if you faxed a response within 24 hours, it was rapid response. So, the entire world has changed and changed technologically. But the fact that these things, these successful elections, are driven by passion and by honest persuasion, is a point that came across very clearly in the film. 2 years after I made that film, David Van Taylor and I made a movie called A Perfect Candidate, which was a campaign film in which Oliver North was running for Senate in Virginia. Oh. In the 1994 Senate race. He was running against Charles Robb, Lyndon Johnson's son-in-law, who was kind of the original DLC member, the original, centrist Democrat. And that film, if you watch it today, it's 23 years old. If you watch that movie today, you'll think you're watching a Donald Trump campaign film. It's the same thing, because in America, we are still fighting the fight over race. We are still fighting the right over gender equality. Those are the two most significant fault lines in American society, and we've been fighting over them since the beginning. There's also class, of course, and those three things defined the battles from at the beginning of the Republic. They defined the battles in the post-Civil War era. Of course, they led to the Civil War. Yeah. They defined the battles in the post-Civil War era, and they define the battles today. And it's amazing. Oliver North wasn't as good at it as Donald Trump is, at being a demagogue, but he sure did try, and you see him playing the same game, yeah. The same exact set of manipulations that Donald Trump played. So that's a film for people if they want to see how politics has not changed in America in a quarter century. Take a look at A Perfect Candidate.
Yeah, I heard there was some commentator talking about how things have. I think it was Jon Meacham. Things are the same, or it's a continuum.
Well, Meacham very brilliantly points out that, and he gives us all some hope. I mean, he's such a brilliant historian, and he's a terrific writer. And what he's pointing out is that we have seen dark times before, and the darkness, the clouds overhead, do not mean that the Republic will not survive. And it takes heroism, and it takes women and men of vision and strength and conviction to lead us through these dark times. And his book is a brilliant journey through those critical moments where our survival has been challenged, and because he wants us to know that that this isn't the end of the road if we set our course straight. So he's a good resource for people. That's a terrific book he wrote.
I just want to ask you two more things, but the first one is how did you get interested in, how did you become so political and before you were an artist?
Well, I came of age, in the late 1960s. So 1968 was kind of the first political year I was aware. I was 8 years old in 1960. Well, 7 years old, and during that summer, I think I was 6. But 6 is like, that's when you're old enough to, if you have my parents and my grandparents, you're old enough to, you grow up in a politically aware home to pay attention. So imagine what I was paying attention to in 1968, and I was getting my news from Huntley Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and I remember the day my grandfather explained to me what a ballot was and why we go to the polls, and of course I remember the day that Bobby Kennedy was killed and the day that Martin Luther King was killed, and I was just, these were defining moments in my coming of age. So, and I was very compelled by the Yippies, and I Abby Hoffman was a hero of mine. I had an older brother who's 8 years older than I was. So all of those things contributed to this young, this boy who was very compelled by not only by the politics of his time, but by the political narrative. It was very interesting and exciting to me, even from a young age. And, when I was 14, I kind of joined the Yippies, so I had this early experience with them, and I wrote about it for a magazine, and, because I was this kind of child member of the Yippies during the 1976 presidential election, the run-up to that election. So I just have always been compelled by it as narrative as much as I've been compelled by it as a citizen. And I'm interested in the women and men who will lead us. I'm as compelled by somebody like Oliver North or somebody like Vice President Cheney, who I also made a film about, as I am by folks with whom I have more in common in terms of my political beliefs. I'm not only interested in people who I share political beliefs with. I'm interested in those who would, venture to lead us, and how they do it, and who they are, and what it takes. And I'm fascinated by just a number of hands you have to shake to survive a political campaign.
You're a film director.
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, and it's interesting that Donald Trump doesn't, endure that. He won't shake a hand because he's a germaphobe. But You know, when I watch these candidates on the campaign trail for months, 14 hours a day, shaking, that's pain.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to endure a lot of pain to run for office.
Or if you're a sociopath and you don't have any feelings anyway.
There you go. I mean, what's the relation? How mad do you have to be to actually think you could be president of the United States?
Yeah.
And what is that? You know, this is all interesting stuff, as you know.
Yeah, yeah. This being Mueller Time podcast, will Robert Mueller make an appearance on Oval Office tapes, or
when he calls the White House or goes to visit, and they send us tapes of the conversation, we're looking forward to sharing it with the world.
And how does I mean, to state the obvious, how does everyone get to listen to the Oval Office tapes?
Oh, you download the Oval Office tapes where you get your favorite podcasts. You can get it from Google. You can get it from Apple Podcasts. You can get it where else, Trevor?
All over the
anywhere where you get your podcasts.
Except Spotify, SoundCloud.
I don't know, man. Just get it. Get it, but you know, most people download from Apple Podcasts, and we're out every Friday, and more to come, and you know, join on in and spread the word and review it if you like it, and if you don't like it, don't review it.
Don't review it. Remember I say do the same thing. If you
don't like it, leave us alone, man. Go find something you like and give them a review.
I also tell people on our show, if you don't like something, call him, that guy. Yeah, his name and address goes on everything.
Very good.
You know.
Very good.
Well, hey, RJ, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Oh, it was such a pleasure.